Hey guys, welcome to another edition of Warforged Talks. I'm your host Travis.
And I'm Joey, and tonight we'll be talking about a couple of the recent hotfixes and the tier gear coming out in the next raid, Blackrock Foundry.
So let's just jump into it, I guess, and
Okay.
we can start with the patch notes.
Okay. So January 12th patch notes, they increased the haste stat. So now it is for every 90 haste, you get 1% increase up from or down from 100. How do you think that's going to really affect? Do you think it's going to have a huge impact, or do you think it's going to be just one of those minor buffs that you don't even notice?
It doesn't really seem like a whole lot, and I think it'll have a slight impact. Obviously, what they're shooting for, just a little bit. It's not going to make anybody OP by any means, I don't think, but um, I think it'll definitely, as a rogue standpoint, it'll give combat a little bit more of an edge over the other specs, but it shouldn't be too big to the point where you have to go combat. What?
Yeah, I'm not sure if mages use haste a lot right now. It should help resto druids a little bit,
Mhm.
but it shouldn't be, like I said, it shouldn't be anything major.
I think
Uh,
it'll help shamans out a little bit, resto shamans. I don't know too much about them, but from when I played them, Ace, it wasn't like a big priority, but it did help with the chain heals.
yeah. And as far as classes, it looks like Death Knight's the prospect. I haven't been seeing many in PvE lately, just only seen in PvP, but Icy Talons now causes the Death Knight to gain 20% up from 5% more haste stat from all sources. How do you think that's going to fare in PvE? You think it's going to be a huge DPS increase?
20% more, you said?
Yeah, up from 5. So they're
Um,
getting an extra 15% total.
Plus that other haste buff for everybody.
Hmm.
I think we're gonna see DKs topping the charts more than they were before.
Probably with the dual wield spec, huh?
Uh, I'm not too sure if they'll run dual wield spec just because when they use a two-hander, they get an obliterate buff, and obliterate hits like a truck right now. But even with the two-handers, the haste is gonna be big, especially if it's 20%. And I'm pretty sure with frost haste is the top stat. Don't quote me on that, but I think it's obviously gonna make DKs even stronger than they were before, and they're pretty good before.
Yeah, I could definitely see that. I don't know why they weren't chopping or topping the charts, but I feel like they definitely will be now.
Mm.
Then it looks like Druid's got a little bit of a nerf on healing wise. The rejuvenation is reduced by 5%. It's not a huge difference, so I don't really feel like anyone's going to see that difference.
Yeah.
Um, but the balanced druids, their mastery, the effects have been increased by 6.7%. I'm not exactly sure what their mastery does, um, but as far as seeing, mastery seems like a really big stat for anyone this expansion.
Yeah. And obviously, giving a buff to somebody's mastery, even if they're not stacking mastery, there's so much gear for everybody that has mastery on it. They're gonna have a good amount of mastery, even if they're trying not to. They'll at least have 10%. So if they're
Hmm.
getting a 6% buff to it, it's probably because mastery right now isn't the top stat or even a top 2 stat. I'm not sure for Boomkins. Obviously, I don't play a druid, but I can only really see a buff that big for a stat like that because they want to make it more of a priority.
Hmm.
So, and really, I don't see a ton of Boomkins out there, anyways. I mean, when we would pug for DPS and uh, normal and heroic, I hardly ever saw any boomkins applying, so it'll be interesting to see if boomkins start getting back to top on the charts or getting close again.
Yeah, that'd definitely be interesting. I have seen some boom kits do huge DPS, but that's mostly when they're AoEing up in the stands on Kargath or
Mhm.
something else like Tectus.
Yeah. Yeah, boomkins do a good job with AoE. It seems like most casters do, but other than that, on the single target fights, I don't really see them doing a ton. Like, usually it's you and me and the hunters and then everybody else for our raids at least.
Hmm.
But hopefully we get to see boomkins getting a little bit of love again.
Let's see. Doesn't look like Hunters really got touched on the 12th. We'll check on the 13th in a little bit. But Fire Mages, their Incineration now causes the mage to gain 15% more of the critical stat from all sources, up from 5%. So they got our huge buff as well, just like DK's. Do you think we're going to see more Fire Mages, or do you think it's going to be Arcane still right now?
I really hope we see more fire mages. I've never played a fire mage, or a mage for that matter, but I've got some buddies who play mages and they say fire was a really fun spec, but it was a real big gear dependent spec. It seemed like in previous expansions they were telling me that you had to have like the top gear to play fire and beat arcane, so hopefully they make a little more of a choice. Like with rogues, all three specs are relevant right now. Obviously assassination is the worst of the three, but they're all still pretty close together, so hopefully mages get that option as well, seeing as they can only DPS.
Yeah. Let's see. Looks like Fire Mage's Pyro Blast, their damage was reduced by 5%. So I feel like from the 15% crit from 5, I think that's going to balance that out pretty easy.
Yeah, hopefully. I remember back in Wrath, I I ran a PMR and I played back when you had more talents to choose from, which is something that we should talk about another time. But he would run Presence of Mind Pyroblast, and that was just a dominating spec. So I really hope to see Fire Mages again. They've got some good AoE with some of their. Uh, it, I don't know if they still have it or not, but back then they had some pretty good AoE and really good single target damage with their Pyroblasts. So we'll see how it goes. What do you think about the mage changes?
It's too hard to say which one's going to be on top. We can look at their tier gear in a little while and see if maybe Fire is going to have a huge DPS spike with them. But from not playing them, it's definitely hard to say what we're going to see. I know Arcane just got a huge buff.
Yeah.
That's it. Let's see, let's go on to the next class. Looks like Protection Pally's got a little bit of a buff. I feel like they kind of needed it, but this buff, I'm not sure if it's going to help them. It's Sacred Duty now causes the Paladin to gain 30%, up from 5%, more of the haste stat from all sources. So that's a huge increase. Well, 25% increase.
Yeah.
I'm sure that'll help a little bit. It's just going to help their damage, that's all. But not with surviving.
Right. I know nothing about Pally, so I'm not sure how that'll affect them. You've got more of an insight than I do, obviously, playing one.
Then it goes down to Priest. Their powered shield absorption has been reduced by 15%. Do you think we're going to see more Holy Priest from instead of Disc, or do you think Disc is still going to be the top dogs?
It's tough to say. I hope Holy gets a little bit more attention. I remember we were talking to a guildie during a run and talking about he's a disc priest, how 55% of his healing was from his bubbles,
Hmm.
which just seems absurd to me. I used to play a disc priest, and back when I played it was when penance was doing a lot more healing, so it was a little more even across the board. But I I just think the bubbles really needed a nerf, no matter which spec was strong or not at the time. So hopefully we see a little more holy priests out there. But either way, I just hope they give a little more diversity for disc priests.
Hmm. And make them actually heal instead of just bubble everyone.
Yeah, like I think they should have nerfed the bubble, but given it back with either penance buff or a flash heal buff.
Yeah, but bubble's also been extremely strong in PvP. If you
Yeah,
don't have a dispel like a mage or a shaman, it's definitely extremely hard to take that thing down,
yeah,
no
like
matter what your burst is.
we play arenas together, and when we 2v2, when we face a priest, we just, if we don't kill him in our first stun lock, it's almost impossible to kill him before one of us gets killed, just because
Yeah,
bubbles are were so ridiculous.
with their pain suppression, it's impossible to kill them.
Hmm.
And it looks like Enhancement Shaman's getting a little bit of a buff, or they did get a buff. Their Storm Strike damage has increased by 11%. I haven't seen many Enhanced Shamans in PvE, and I hardly see them in PvP as well. I mostly see Elemental. So I'm kind of hoping we see Enhancement again.
Yeah,
To me, they're a fun class to play. I played one for a little bit.
right.
Um,
It enhancement. I played enhancement. I never played an endgame, but I leveled a shaman as enhancement. I think I got a little bit of endgame in on him during Cataclysm, but I never really focused too much on him because I quit so soon in Cata. But
mhm.
I feel like enhancement was a ton of fun, especially. I don't know how it is nowadays with the change to the totems, but back then it was just a lot of fun setting out your totems and being able to do so much DPS, and it had the feel of a caster, but you're up in the fight, so it was kind of the best of both worlds, in my opinion.
Mhm. See, it looks like Warlocks. Um, the Demonology, their mastery effects have been increased by 33%. Um, I don't know what their mastery does, but that seems like that's a huge increase.
Yeah, it
I'm sure it
does.
has something to do with their damage.
I can't remember exactly what the mastery is. I never played Demonology on my Warlock. I always played Affliction and Destruction, but I mean, mastery, you can never go wrong with mastery in
Hmm.
whatever class you're playing. So, and Demonology has, I think it's real. Blizzard's been giving it a real push this expansion.
Next, the last couple expansions it's been out, it's just been very trash. Even with the demon form and stuff, you don't see it topping charts on PvE or
Yeah,
PvP.
and from what I hear, it's a really tough rotation to get down, which is, in my opinion, the best part of the game. That's why I went with sub over combat or assassination, because you have to be right on with your rotation or you're gonna miss out on a lot of DPS. So if I was playing my Warlock, I'd probably go Demonology just for the challenge in rotation.
Hmm. And then it looks like they're giving Destruction another stat buff increase, just like the rest of the classes. They're getting the 15% up from 5 for more critical strike from all sources. I have been seeing mostly Affliction. I do feel like that's going to help Destruction come back, because their crits are huge, especially with Chaos Bolts. I'm not sure if Chaos Bolts are 100%. You'd know
Yeah,
more about that.
Chaos Bolt is 100% crit chance, but the thing with crit on Chaos Bolts is the more crit you have, like the higher percentage your crit is, the more damage uh, the Chaos Bolt will do. Like, obviously it's always critting, but the higher your crit chance, the more increased damage there is. But uh, I believe, I don't know if it's still the same, but haste was the big stat for Affliction, and
Makes their dots tick a lot faster.
yeah, and Mastery was the big stat for Destruction. So getting a nice little crit boost, obviously it's going to help their incinerates as well, but stacking that Mastery, which increases the damage all around for Incinerate and Chaos Bolt, and just any move that uses the Soul Stones.
Mm-hmm.
So giving them a nice little crit buff is gonna really impact the damage that they can put out.
And then the last class that's got a little bit of change on the 12th was Warriors. I feel like this is going to be the biggest impact on any classes that day for hotfixes. Um, so first, in general, it was Thunderclap's damage has been increased by 40%. I don't feel like that's really used at all.
Hmm.
So that might help. I guess tanks are pretty much the only ones that use it, if they use it.
Yeah.
And then besides that, it's goes into arms. Arms is getting a little bit of an increase. Arms mastery, or yeah, their mastery has been increased by 57.1%. I know we have seen a ton of fury. I feel like that's gonna bring arms back a little bit,
Yeah.
but we'll see how much it really affects them.
I never played arms on I mean, I never got to max level either, so it's not really saying much. I'm not claiming I know anything about warriors, but uh, from what I heard, arms was a lot of fun for my buddies that played warriors, so hopefully that brings arms back for them.
Mm-hmm. Now the biggest part is the protection. We in the beginning of the expansion, prop warriors were definitely the most OP in PvP. They were also one of the top damage dealers in the game. So what they did to them, they nerfed them a couple weeks ago. Now they're buffing them again. So protection power or warriors are getting deep wounds damage has been increased by 40%. Devastate's damage has been increased by 20%. Revenge's damage has been increased by 40%. And Shield Slam's damage has been increased by 20%. But they're changing Gladiator's stance to now increase damage by 5%, down from 20%. Do you think they're going to be a little bit stronger, or do you think they're going to be about even? They're just trying to help the PvP.
I think we're gonna see a lot of prots coming back. I remember they're big in PvE as well. We were running like I think it was our first time downing Tectus, and there was a prot warrior that was like second on the DPS charts. So I think we're gonna see a return of prot warriors big time in both the PvP and the PvE aspects of the game, which I'm not a big fan of. I think tanks shouldn't be PvPing unless they're like flag runners and BGs. I don't think tanks should be viable in arenas unless maybe some fives teams, but even with that, I don't see a reason you should be PvPing as a tank. You should be going as a healer or a damage dealer, because obviously the point of arena is you want to kill the other people, and by no means should a tank be out damaging a damage dealer.
Very true. Alright, moving on real quick, we'll just get through the 13th ones. A couple classes got a little bit more buffs. Um, Death Knight's got a little bit of damage increase for Unholy. Festering Strike damage has been increased by 28%. Scourge Strike's damage has been increased by 28% as well. I don't feel like that's really going to push Unholy as a spec to be. I feel like with the haste increase, Frost is still going to be the one to be.
Right. And I mean, I'm not a fan of Blizzard buffing DKs as it is, but Unholy really is an underplayed spec. So I would go as far to say as they should have left Frost alone, or even nerfed Frost at a certain extent, and given Unholy a little bit more of a buff so that they could be a little more viable. I played a DK and Wrath, and back when all three specs could tank, and Unholy was one of my favorites. DPS wise, it was my favorite by far, but I don't know how it is nowadays since I don't play a DK right now.
It doesn't look like they really did anything in Druid. It's just a graphical change. Monks, they're changing a little bit of their PvP set bonuses, so nothing big. And it was just for tank monks. Rogues for combat, though, they're doing Blade Fury is now able to trigger multi-strikes. Um, how do you think that's going to play out? You think combat's going to start taking over sub?
I definitely think combat's getting a big push right now in the game. I just think Blizzard is trying to. I'm not gonna speak for Blizzard obviously, but my opinion is they're trying to make one of the specs just head and shoulders better than the other, and it feels right now that they're going in the direction of combat. And I mean, I don't really have a problem with it. I think sub is a lot more fun rotation wise, but I don't have a problem going combat if that is going to be the better spec PvE wise. Right now I'm combat for PvP, and just because of the burst damage, but I think it's gonna start to take over on the PvE side of things a little bit more, especially with the tier gear coming out, which we can talk about in another video.
Yeah, because we're definitely running out of time here. So we'll definitely get to the tier 17 gear in the next video. Didn't make it to this one. We are going to be ending the show about now, but real quick, I want to give a shout out to my cousin who gave us a shout out on his YouTube channel. His YouTube channel is just Jason Wivert, so Jason JASON space Wivert WIVART. We'll post a link in the description. His channel, he plays a bunch of games. He'll play ArcAge and a ton of phone games. He does some guides, but mostly it's just a lot of videos for fun. It's definitely worth taking a look at his channel if you're into ArcAge or any phone games. I'm sure he plays them, and he would love to have you guys over there.
And hopefully this video was helpful to the viewers. I know we didn't really go over much other than just the patch notes and our opinions on it, but we'd love to hear your guys' opinions on the upcoming changes to the game, what you think about the future of this expansion, and what you guys would love to see coming up as the game continues. And until next time, guys, we'll see you in the next video.
All right, have a good night.